It looks like we're live. It's good to be back, you guys. I had 2 surgeries, so I've been out of commission for a while. I'm still out of commission. It turned out that the issue was far worse than we knew. So if I hadn't done it, I would probably have died. But the result is that I'm going to be out of commission, like unable to perform, usual activities for quite a while. And that's not helpful. So we appreciate support still. That's really bad news for us. But overall, I'm excited and optimistic. It's been a bummer to be out of commission. The discoveries under the pyramid. I have a lot to say about that. In fact, I talked about it in my debunk of Billy Carson and Professor Dave. Basically, I was doing work at the computer one day, and I just kind of leaned back and closed my eyes to rest them. And I had a vision of the pyramid with the capstone off, and it had like electromagnetic energy coming out in this. It kind of looked like the net of being that Alex Gray has painted. And I knew that it was being used to mess with the morphology or the consciousness of people, but I didn't know which. And a little while later, I found out that there were melted stone stairs in the Hathor temple. And researchers said the only thing that could have done it is a powerful blast of electromagnetic energy or a nuclear blast. So that was interesting, but it was in the wrong place. And then a couple weeks after that, I found a video about the melted stone around the capstone of the second pyramid. So that was really interesting at that point. And then I discovered that scientists had, or maybe I think it actually just happened, that papers were published saying that the pyramids generate their own electromagnetic fields. And so I said, well, there's something underneath of it, some kind of amplifier to have the effect that I saw in this vision. And then when they announced this discovery, I was pleased, and I found out also that Tesla thought the same thing. Also, I came to the conclusion that these things somehow created something like a field disruptor, so that the blocks no longer weighed anything. They're separated from gravity. And that seems pretty far out, but apparently Tesla thought that as well. And so those things under the pyramid were used to make the blocks gravity free, and then they were easily lifted and set into place. There was some other element of that was irrelevant. But anyways, I'll do another stream and talk all about that stuff and the possibilities. Let me check in with the chat before we go any further so I can make sure we have audio and whatnot. Do we have audio? Everything's good? Yeah, it's good to still be around. Okay, so magic is the subject of this there's I hate that word, just like I hate the word spirituality. There's too many negative connotations, and when you look back at the material from people like Eliphas Levi, it's undeniable that it's not nonsense. That Levi was one of the most intelligent people of his age, for example, and a lot of the ideas that he presented have proven true, or are just now on the cusp of being proven true, right? Like the electromagnetic basis of consciousness is posited as the fundamental mechanism of magic in these old systems. And electromagnetism had just been discovered around the time that this book was published, which means that while he was writing it, it was probably just a theoretical, there was no experimental verification, there was no real proof that it was even a thing. So, we have, and there's much more than that, but just as an example. And so if you consider how we got to this place where magic has such a terrible reputation, there's a couple of layers. One of them is that very early on, Egypt, there's documentation of this, certainly in the Roman consulate, banning the mysteries because they realized that they were a threat to their sovereignty, because they endowed the people with a sense of sovereignty. And not just a sense of sovereignty, a recognition of sovereignty, and an ability to walk with that knowledge wisely. And so they created the monotheistic religion in Egypt and banned the mystery tradition, except for the pharaohs, right? And then the same thing happens in Rome. Aristotle says humanity is lost without the mysteries, so they go into hiding. In both places, government officials were sent to infiltrate the mysteries and get the secrets. That's how we ended up with this thing of Freemasons and world leaders being part of the mystery traditions. It's caused a lot of confusion and a lot of demonization, right? But if you think about physics and then try to imagine if just anyone could declare themselves a physicist, and then they could just say anything, and that's physics. That's what happened to the sacred science of the Magi. That's what happened to magic. And this is a difficult thing for people to accept as well, I think, because we've lost respect for these traditions and the people that occupy the office of shaman and magician, right? It's not the case that any person can become a shaman. It's not the case that any person can become an adept. Any person can have experiences of the phenomena that are dealt with therein. But in order to really excel at these things, it's the same as any other science. You have to have in order to be, a real adept, you're going to have an astronomically high IQ. You're going to have tremendous discipline and willpower, tremendous focus, and other predispositions, that dictate exactly what your specialty would be. So, that's basically what happened. We lost the hierarchical management, and in a sense that's good because we don't really need bosses. But when I say hierarchical in this context, it means something a little bit different than like a military hierarchy. It means that there are people that are there to recognize when a person is ascending to another level or degree. Whereas in our current situation, people just decide that they think they're something, and that's, I'm a channeler, I'm this, I'm that. And to anyone who has actually taken initiation, which is where we're going to start in the book tonight, it's really a horrifying thing to see. Because in the mystery tradition, channeling is kind of a thing, but you would never even attempt it unless you have had rigorous years of training. Because it takes a tremendously out of balance ego, for example, to believe that you can distinguish between, a truly benevolent spirit and Satan come as an angel of light if you're just, an average person with no training. So, what do we do about it? We try to educate ourselves and improve ourselves and be honest with ourselves and, try to walk with knowledge wisely to the best of our ability, accept humility, to the degree that we are able. Okay, so this is a little bit blurry. The site that I normally use is gone, which is really sad because it was a tremendous resource for this kind of material. So we actually did this part last time, initiation, yes ad bonum, but we're going to do it again because it's very brief and it's a great place to start. So the initiate is he who possesses the lamp of Trismegistus, the mantle of Apollonius, and the staff of the patriarchs. The lamp of Trismegistus is reason illuminated by science. The mantle of Apollonius is full and complete self-possession, which isolates the sage from blind tendencies. And the staff of the patriarchs is the help of the secret and everlasting forces of nature. The lamp of Trismegistus enlightens present, past, and future, lays bare the conscience of men, conscience of men, and manifest the inmost recesses of the female heart. The lamp burns with a triple flame, the mantle is thrice-fold, and the staff is divided into 3 parts. The number 9 is that of divine reflections. It expresses the divine idea in all its abstract power, but it also signifies extravagance in belief, and hence superstition and idolatry. That's actually a really interesting thing, because 9 is the Sephirah of Yesod. Illusion is part of the symbolism of that Sephirah. And 9 is the moon. And so the divine reflection, the sunlight reflecting on the moon, and I can't remember exactly which details, but I think if you reduce the distance from Earth to the moon, it adds to 9, the circumference adds to 9, a whole bunch of the numbers, regarding the moon, all reduced to 9. So pretty interesting. And the number of the sun is 6. And if you reflect something, it is reversed. So 6 inverted becomes 9. For this reason, Hermes has made it the number of initiation, because the initiate reigns over superstition and by superstition, and alone can advance through the darkness, leaning on his staff, enveloped in his mantle, and lighted by his lamp. Something I forgot to mention is it's also the number of truth, because any multiple of 9 reduces again to 9. The truth is always the truth. And what he means by the initiate reigns over superstition and by superstition, a little bit tricky to explain. But basically, superstition is when people have observed phenomena that science can't understand, they have come up with their own explanations for it. And oftentimes, these explanations are tinged with fear, partly due to the influence of institutionalized religions trying to scare people away from their power, and also due to the fact that the unknown scares people, just generally speaking. And so the initiate seeks to understand the mechanisms that lie behind these phenomena. In the modern day, we know that entanglement is likely the mechanism behind telepathy. And we have lots of other examples of that sort of thing, where the mechanism behind these kind of phenomena is now known or suspected, at least. And since the beginning of time, that was the charge of the initiate. And even if you don't know the mechanism, there is a mechanism. That there has to be some way for things to play out, or they're impossible. Magic is not about doing the impossible. It is about developing such a sophisticated and masterful relationship with the laws of nature and the laws of your own being that your behavior and deeds can strike people as apparently miraculous. And so, and it's really important because it keeps you humble. It keeps you from attempting to accomplish things that are beyond your actual ability. The most common mistake that the magician can make is to think that his magic can do more for him than it can. Right? So if you know the limitations, then you're not going to waste your energy and you're not going to get yourself into trouble. Reason has been given to all men, but all do not know how to make use of it. It is a science to be acquired. Liberty is offered to all, but not all can be free. It is a right that must be earned. Force is for all, but all do not know how to rest upon it. It is a power that must be seized. We attain nothing without more than one effort. The destiny of man is that he should enrich himself with what he gains, and that he should afterwards have, like God, the glory and pleasure of dispensing it. Magic was called formerly the sacerdotal art and the royal art because initiation gave empire over souls to the sage and the adroitness for ruling wills. And this is one of the unfortunate consequences, I guess, of the archons, who were it was a title of a type of magistrate in Rome, and others of that ilk invading the mysteries and stealing secrets. One of the primary investitures, one of the biggest gains that you get from being an initiate is intuitive understanding of psychology. That most people that don't have it, they just cannot even comprehend that it exists. And this allows the rulers to create a facade of bumbling bureaucracy and incompetent clowns, and to hide behind that, and to manipulate on a level that the common person just cannot even perceive. People generally have to bring the universe down to their level so that they can comprehend it and live within it, you know? But that's not what the universe actually is, beyond their perception. And I'm sure I don't have to tell any of you, this is a massive problem for humanity at the moment. Because, for one thing, you're not going to learn what you don't want to know. And the other problem is that, you know, you're trying to communicate something that is not a perceptible to the people to whom you need to communicate it. Tricky stuff. Divination is also one of the privileges of the initiate. Now, divination is simply the knowledge of effects contained in causes in science applied to the facts of the universal dogma of analogy. Man, that is solid. Jesus. Yeah, hold on. Let's talk about this now. Knowledge of effects contained in causes in science applied to the facts of the universal dogma of analogy. The universal dogma of analogy seems to me to be a slightly separate subject. But for example, you know, if you notice that the Fibonacci is present in charts for cryptocurrencies, and also in the structure of the human hand and all this stuff, you guys know all of that. Everyone does at this point, I would imagine. But you then realize that this same sort of algorithm underlies all phenomena, and that you can map history in micro patterns and macro patterns, and that you will see these sort of holographic repetitions of these patterns. For example, in the 1960s, we had a resurgence of psychedelic drug use. We had a Kennedy running for president, we had civil unrest, and a few years back, we had exactly the same circumstances. And, you know, that's not just history repeating itself because of collective psychological manifestations or whatever. You know, it is literally a holographic pattern that underlies the same thing as a seashell, right? So that's part of what he means by that. And analogy in the sense that these things are analogous, not analogy in the literary sense. However, there are other aspects of that that are sort of demonstrations of the universal mind and its processes. Hold that thought. Let me check in. I'm getting paranoid about the chat because... Okay, good. We're good. Why... Why is there no picture? You guys do have a picture, right? And let me see what's going on here. Okay, yeah, we're good. Let me go back to my book. Yeah, so what were we talking about? Okay, the other this other level or expression of the universal mind. Mercury, I use this analogy a lot. Sorry if it's, you know, redundant at this point, but it's the best one. You know, Mercury, the closest planet to the sun. In alchemy, it's not actually lead that you turn into gold. Lead has a different function. It's quicksilver, mercury. Mercury is one proton away from being gold. You knock a proton off and it's gold now, right? So that relationship was not deliberate. You know, whoever named those planets was not aware of the relationship between Mercury, the planet, or Mercury, the elemental Mercury, and gold. But it's not exactly a coincidence either. Another example is the pyramids, where the longitude is exactly the speed of light, and the mysteries were basically a religion of light that were practiced. That they didn't originate there, but that we associate with Egypt, and they definitely were, So that's another one. And then also, and this is where it starts getting really weird, elemental Mercury was put into moats around like the burial chambers of royalty in a Aztec subgroup, and also in Egypt sometimes. Mercury, with the function of helping the deceased to get to the underworld. And Mercury, the psychopomp, the Greek Mercury, has the same function. These things are not exactly coincidences. And this is the sort of thing that the adept learns to read and extract information from the relationships, basically. So we also call that the book of nature is written in metaphor. Did I just get us lost? All right, where are we? Human acts are not alone written in the astral light. Their traces are left upon the face. They modify mien and carriage. They change the tone of the voice. Thus, every man bears about him the history of his life, which is legible for the initiate. Now, the future is ever the consequence of the past, and unexpected circumstances do not appreciably alter results reasonably calculated. So there is a formula in Magic and Theory and Practice by Aleister Crowley. Any change can be affected by the proper kind and degree of force through the proper medium to the proper object. If you fulfill the postulate, then your effect is assured. But all of the criteria must be met with exacting specificity. If you try to make lysergic acid diethylamide tartrate 25, and you make a slight error in calculation or weight or temperature, it's not going to turn out to be lysergic acid diethylamide 25. The destiny of each man can be therefore foretold him. An entire existence can be judged by a single movement. One piece of awkwardness may be the presage of a long chain of misfortunes. Caesar was assassinated because he was ashamed of being bald. Napoleon ended his days at St. Helena because he admired the poems of Ossian. Louis Philippe abdicated the throne as he did because he carried an umbrella. These are paradoxes for the vulgar who cannot grasp the occult relationship of things, but they are causes for the adept who understands all and is surprised at nothing. There's more to that, I think, than he's describing there. It's one of my strongest talents that I know everything about a person on sight. And what he's talking about, the smallest little thing can tell me apparently unrelated stuff, I know your history of trauma by the way that you stand and certain elements of your movement. And they're very subtle aesthetics, but they're very, very telling. And I suspect there are deeper things going on, that once you have lowered your filtration filter, your reducing valve in your consciousness sufficiently, it sort of remains lowered. And so there's a sort of feedback loop with everyone around you all the time on a subconscious level. Ayahuasca does this to a degree that is just absolutely remarkable. And you retain that to an extent. It's not as succinct as it is when you're actually in ceremony. But after a while, you do retain that sort of automatic telepathy. And it's not exactly like that you're receiving other people's thoughts. Stuff just comes out of your mouth, and then you find out because of the expression or something, how they respond to you, what actually went down. Initiation is a preservation against the false lights of mysticism. It equips human reason with its relative value and proportional infallibility, connecting it with supreme reason by the chain of analogies. Hence, the initiate knows no doubtful hopes, no absurd fears, because he has no irrational beliefs. He is acquainted with the extent of his power, and he can dare without danger. For him, therefore, to dare is to be able. Here, then, is a new interpretation of his attributes. His lamp represents learning, the mantle which enwraps him his discretion, and his staff is the emblem of his strength and daring. He knows, he dares, and is silent. He knows the secrets of the future, he dares in the present, and he is silent on the past. He knows the failings of the human heart, he dares make use of them to achieve his work, and he is silent as to his purposes. He knows the principle of all symbolisms and of all religions. He dares to practice or to abstain from them without hypocrisy and without impiety. And he is silent upon the one dogma of supreme initiation. He knows the existence and nature of the great magical agent. He dares perform the acts and give utterance to the words which make it subject to human will, and be silent upon the mysteries of the great arcanum. And actually, during my initiatory phase, I had to choose something that was like possible, but extremely unlikely, and just do it. And I decided that I wanted to talk to the drummer from Tool, and I've made a video about this, so I'm not going to go into the whole story right now, but I did not look him up, I did not stalk him, I did not check to see where he was, and I drove right to him. The only help I got was at the very end when a friend called me and said, because I told my friends, because I needed witnesses, you know, I'm going to go talk to Danny Carey from Tool because he'd been studying all the same stuff as I was interested in. And I figured he had access to, higher levels than me. And maybe he would tell me something or at least confirm something. And so, I drove right to him. And there's a lot to the story, but I was successful in that. And It all, I guess the one thing I'm wanting to add is that it does at times also seem like there is a higher agency at play here, because when I got to the club, I had exactly to the penny the amount of money I needed to get in, to the penny. You know, we got stuck in Vegas for 3 days, and it was just right in time that we got the money to leave again, and I got there I think 10 minutes before Danny pulled up. I was sitting on my car playing 46 and 2 when he walked by and looked over and kind of blushed a little bit. But yeah, you know, and the thing about these kind of experiments is that you have to do this in order to prove things to yourself. You know, we don't use faith in scientific illuminism. We operate on certainty, or at least as close to certainty as you can possibly get, you know? So you have to choose something that puts you at a tolerable degree of risk, right? It's got to be a big deal, and it has to take some effort, and there has to be some possibility of real loss, but you don't want to gamble your life, you know, unless it's really that relevant. But you know what I mean? And even if you succeed, you still have to consider the possibility of chance, because there's always the possibility of chance, no matter how absurdly specific and improbable the thing that you accomplish is. Even after doing this sort of thing numerous times in my life, I still had too much doubt, if anything. You know, and the other reaction that people will often have to this is that their ego goes off the deep end and they start believing they can cause any kind of manifestation they can think of, and that's not true. That's not how it works. So, yeah. He knows the existence and nature of the great magical agent. He dares perform the acts and give utterance to the words which make it subject to human will, and he is silent upon the mysteries of the great arcanum. I guess having this YouTube channel, I'm really fucking up on the silence. But about 100 years ago, a bunch of adepts all decided the time for secrecy is over, because if we don't get this knowledge back to the people, then we are doomed. And here we are, maybe doomed, And Hermes is there at the crossroads waiting for us. There's a massive resurgence and interest in this kind of stuff all of a sudden. Which actually is more evidence in my mind of the existence of a universal mind, because we have this happening in the evolutionary process right now. We have acacia trees in Africa that have stopped making tannins that get them cut down because they're on the edge of extinction, and the tannins are what get them cut down. And they did this adaptation in a matter of a season. So it's context aware. Whatever the universal mind is that's, driving, that has, how do you say it? Oversight in the evolutionary process, is aware that this has to happen quickly. There's no way the organism itself could have thought it, because it's a tree and it couldn't possibly know, why it's getting cut down. So it has to be some external agent that's aware of the context. So what would that be? Only a universal mind. And so this resurgence of Hermeticism is the same kind of adaptation in humanity, I believe. He remembers the bereavement. So you may find him often melancholy and never dejected or despairing, often poor, never abject or miserable, persecuted often, never disheartened or conquered. He remembers the bereavement and murder of Orpheus, the exile and lonely death of Moses, the martyrdom of the prophets, the tortures of Apollonius, the cross of the Savior. He knows the desolation in which Agrippa died. His memory is even now slandered. He knows what labors overcame the great Paracelsus, and all that Raymond Lilly was condemned to undergo, that he might finish by a violent death. He remembers Swedenborg simulating madness and even losing reason in order to excuse his science. St. Martin and his hidden life, Cagliostro, who perished forsaken in the cells of the Inquisition, Calzote, who ascended the scaffold, inheritor of so many victims. He does not dare the less, but he understands better the necessity for silence. Let us follow his example. Let us learn diligently. When we know, let us have courage and let us be silent. And I'm not really sure about all of that. I feel like I know things right now that most people are not aware of, and I'm talking about the masses, not the people on our playing field. But I'm pretty sure I should tell them. The silence has a couple of purposes. One of them is the conservation of energy, right? When you give something away, it's gone. Another element of it is that when you introduce ideas into the consciousness of others, there's the possibility of distorting the reality of that thing. Especially if we're talking about something along the lines of a precognition. So there's also the fact that if a person is able to ascend to the higher levels of this kind of understanding, there is knowledge that can be extremely dangerous in the wrong hands. And all of that, I will just say, if it's true that opposites create each other, just think about that, run it to its logical conclusion that it applies to all systems, not just, rocks hitting stuff or whatever. Equal and opposite reaction, is what I meant there. It gets to some pretty hairy places, and it's not meant for everyone. Not only can it be dangerous for people, it can cause existential crisis, depression, and even worse, madness. So now we're getting into the Kabbalah. Let me check in with the chat one more time and see where we're at. What is the deal here? All right. By the way, you guys, do me a favor and consider hitting the like button, sharing, subscribing, becoming a patron. You get access to 7 years now, I think, of secret streams dealing with Masonic secrets and different occult stuff and shamanism, and patron-only content and discounts on certain things and stuff. And I do consultations on various subjects. So we really appreciate support because we're demonetized. And as I said in the beginning of the stream, these surgeries are costing me months of working, basically. So it's a a bit of an inconvenience. And we do appreciate each and every one of you guys for supporting. There's also options to support in the chat if you just want to make a one-time contribution via PayPal or Zelle or crypto. All right, so the Kabbalah. This is one of the most important subjects that ever subjected. Malkut Principium Phallus. All religions have preserved the remembrance of a primitive book written in types by the sages of the earliest ages of the world, simplified and vulgarized in later days. Its symbols furnished letters to the art of writing, characters to the word, and to occult philosophy its mysterious signs and pentacles. This book, attributed by the Hebrews to Enoch, seventh master of the world after Adam, by the Egyptians to Hermes Trismegistus, and by the Greeks to Cadmus, the mysterious builder of the holy city. This book was the symbolical summary of primitive tradition, called subsequently Kabbalah or Kabbalah, meaning reception. The tradition in question rests altogether on the one dogma of magic. The visible is for us the proportional measure of the invisible. Super important statement. Okay, so real quick before we go any deeper into this, earlier in the book, Levi said that Kabbalah will prove to be the main mystical system that bridges with science in the future. And if Penrose's CCC theory, which basically says that every particle will eventually collide with its antiparticle and there's nothing left behind but photons, so matter is light in a standing wave and then it returns back into the light at the end, which is exactly what happens in the Kabbalah. And I actually had AI, I think this is in an earlier video. If it's not, I'll do a stream and feature this, where the AI broke down how it's not just that, but the entire process that's described in the descent and formulation of the universe in the Tree of Life reflects the entire process in physics as it's understood by modern physicists. So that is one of those instances of the adept knowing. He wasn't silent about that. The tradition in question rests altogether on the one dogma of magic. The visible is for us the proportional measure of the invisible. Now the ancients, observing the equilibrium as the universal law in physics, consequent on the apparent opposition of two forces, argued from physical to metaphysical equilibrium, and maintained that in God, that is, in the prime living and active cause, there must be recognized two properties which are necessary to one another: stability and motion, necessity and liberty, rational order, and volitional autonomy, justice and love, whence also severity and mercy. Okay, so remember what I was saying about the crystallization of the light and the redintegration of light. Well, he was saying that for us, the physical is the measure of the metaphysical. And that this process of equilibrium, basically a net zero state, fluctuating. Basically, he was describing that happens on a spiritual level and also on a physical level. We talk of annihilating the ego, right, in order to reformulate. We also see in the world at large right now, solvet coagula, the old system collapsing in on itself. And that's a necessary prerequisite for a new order to emerge. The problem is that you never know if it's going to collapse with such intensity that it doesn't reformulate, at least not right away. By the way, that reminded me of something I see a lot. People mistake, the Christians a lot, the fundamentalist type, they see slogans like solvet coagula, and then they see what's happening in the world, and they think that it's just Masons staging this solvet coagula thing. It's not. That's the process of their God in action, Just a little note there. So now these two attributes were personified, so to speak, by the Kabbalistic Jews under the names of Geburah and Chesed. Above Geburah and Chesed abides the supreme crown, the equilibrating power, principle of the world or equilibrated kingdom, which we find mentioned under the name of Malkut in the occult and Kabbalistic versicle of the Pater Noster, to which we have already referred. But Geburah and Chesed maintain in equilibrium by the crown above and the kingdom below, constitute two principles which may be considered from an abstract point of view or in their realization. In their abstract or idealized sense, they take the higher names of Chakma, wisdom, and Bina, intelligence. Their realization is stability and progress. That is eternity and victory, Had and Netzach. It's worth it, by the way, you guys, to go back if you haven't watched the earlier parts of this, because he explains the tetrad and other aspects of this that are so important to understand. And one of the things that you have to remember about this kind of wisdom is that conscious understanding isn't always even required. It is better. It helps. It's actually essential. But when you, it's not, I shouldn't have even said that really, because it's not about not understanding it consciously. It's about the unfoldment that occurs in the subconscious once it has hold of these things, right? The example of the tetrad and the triad becoming the tetrad, once this process is inculcated, there are all sorts of other relationships and applications of this knowledge that are just going to formulate and do their little geometrical dance of building structures in your subconscious, and your knowledge is going to expand while you're sleeping. You know, once you set these things in motion, they have a life of their own in your being. You know, another great one is it's one thing doing one thing. You know, when you first hear that, you just think, well, that's what all the mystics say. It's a cliche. Everyone, no. Not, it's all one. It's all one thing doing one thing. And supposedly the guru that was teaching this, that's all he would say. And they kicked him out of the United States for it. And if you don't understand why yet, trust me, now that that has been lodged in your brain, you'll never get it out. Not that you should want to. Such, according to the Kabbalah, is the groundwork of all religions and all sciences. A triple triangle and a circle, the notion of the triad explained by the balance multiplied by itself in the domains of the ideal. Then the realization of this conception informs. Now the ancients attached the first notions of this simple and impressive theology to the very ideas of number and qualified the figures of the first decade after the following manner. So real quick though, the triple triangle and circle, the notion of the triad explained by the balance multiplied by itself in the domains of the ideal. I have this idea that the veil that is described by various traditions as a barrier that converts the ideal to the actual. And so this is the functional layer of the universal mind, right? This is a higher dimensional layer of physics that we have not yet uncovered, but we kind of have. And I know I've done a stream about this. I'm going to do more streams about it as it develops, but basically it involves Fourier transforms, the Euler formula, and Calabi-Yau structures. And the interesting thing about it is the Calabi-Yau structure, I had no idea what it was, but I knew what it did. And so I had to do some research to find out that it was correct, that it actually does basically convert energy into form. So exactly what would be needed to be the operating, mechanism of the universal mind if such a thing existed. And that's something that he is explaining here very closely. In fact, maybe I will do a entire video, a short one, where I'll show how these equations relate to by the balance multiplied by itself in the domains of the ideal. That's the Euler formula that he's discussing. It's just so crazy to see this stuff, man. Now the ancients attached the first notions of the simple and impressive theology to the very idea of numbers and qualified the figures of the first decade after the following manner. Keter, the crown, the equilibrating power. Chakma, wisdom, equilibrated, I don't think we use that word that way anymore, in its unchangeable order by the initiative of intelligence. I have never heard of Keter being described as the equilibrating power. That is an interesting perspective on it. Bina, active intelligence, equilibrated. How do I want to say that? Now I can't even remember how the word is now. Equilibrated. Yeah, I thought it was equilibrated by wisdom. Chesed, mercy, which is wisdom in its secondary conception, ever benevolent because it is strong. Mercy is wisdom in its secondary conception. That's gangster. Geburah, austerity necessitated by wisdom itself and by goodwill. To permit evil is to hinder good. Typeret, beauty, the luminous conception of equilibrium in forms, intermediary between the crown and the kingdom, mediating principle between creator and creation. Sublime conception of poetry and its sovereign priesthood. Let me look at this again. Beauty, the luminous conception of equilibrium in forms, intermediary between the crown and the kingdom, mediating principle between creator and creation. The sun. Sublime conception of poetry and its sovereign priesthood. Netzach, victory, that is, eternal triumph of intelligence and justice. Had, eternity in the conquest achieved by mind over matter, active over passive, life over death. Hesed, the foundation, that is, the basis of all belief and all truth. What we term the absolute in philosophy. It's also the illusion, and a lot of the attributions that he's giving to these Sephirot are not incorrect by any stretch, but they are different from what you would typically see today, and probably more reliable, because this is a man that actually read the old Hebrew writings on Kabbalah and studied the other ancient systems, because it doesn't just come from there. In fact, it probably originated in Babylonia or Syria. And really it didn't originate anywhere except bubbling up through the subconscious of the individual adept via the universal mind. Malkut, the kingdom is the universe, entire creation, the work and mirror of God, the proof of supreme reason, the formal consequence which compels us to have recourse to virtual premises. Ow. Sorry guys, my surgery wound just stabbed me all of a sudden. I don't know why. The enigma which has God for its answer, supreme and absolute reason. These 10 primary notions, attached to the 10 first characters of the primitive alphabet, signify both principles and numbers, are called the 10 Sephirot by the masters in Kabbalah. The sacred tetragram, drawn in the following manner, indicates the number, source, and correspondence of the divine names. Let's see, 3, 6, 9... 12, 6, 6, 12, 15, 18, 9. I've never seen that before. I'm not really sure what to make of that. I don't think it's supposed to be Hebrew. Number, source, and correspondence of the divine names. This name of Jochava, written by these 4 and 20 signs, crowned with a triple flower of light, must be referred the 24 thrones of heaven and the 24 crowned elders in the apocalypse. The number of the sun is 6, 24 adds to 6. This is all about light. In the Kabbalah, the occult principle is called the elder, and this principle multiplied and, as it were, reflected in secondary causes, creates images of itself. That's what I was about to talk about. That's wild. Wait till you guys hear this. This is epic. And there's a video you can watch all about it. That is to say, so many elders as there are diverse conceptions of its unique essence. These images, less perfect in proportion as they are further removed from their source, project upon the darkness an ultimate reflection or glimmer, representing a horrible and deformed elder who is vulgarly termed the devil. Hence, an initiate has been bold enough to say the devil is God as understood by the wicked, while another has added, in words more bizarre but no less energetic, the devil is composed of God's ruins. We may sum up and explain these strikingly novel definitions by remarking that in symbolism itself, the demon is an angel cast out of heaven for having sought to usurp divinity. This belongs to the allegorical language of prophets and makers of legends. Before we go on, there is a circle of fifths, right? And it's a tool that's used in music theory, basically, for you non-musicians. And it's based on the major scale, more or less. And so if you base it on the chromatic scale, now it has 12 notes instead of, or it's divided into 12. It's not that there are not 12 notes. It's that there are 12 segments, let's put it that way. And so if you draw a pentagram, or if you connect a line from each octave, so from D to D to D to D to D, it makes a perfect pentagram. And there are 12 signs of the zodiac. So earlier he was talking about how these things reflect themselves in these other things, right? And that's a really great example of the fact that the basic concept of music is that there is a star that could also be thought of as God, and that is home, that is the source, that is the source of our consciousness. It comes to us on the rays of the light, but on another level, the universal mind, right? And so the planets are held in their orbit by this star, and they are informed by it. And in music, everything is revolving around a central tonic that everything wants to resolve and return to, you know, and the relationships that those notes have with anything is based on that intervallic relationship to that tonic. I could go on about this forever because actually the 1, the 2, the introduction of duality, now we have a minor chord, right? The whole way through the scale, the symbolism reflects the numerology of I call it functional numerology, you know, because it's based on what numbers do as living entities. Right? I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole at the moment. Philosophically speaking, the devil is a human idea of divinity, which has been surpassed and dispossessed of heaven by the progress of science and reason. Among primitive Oriental peoples, Moloch, Adramelech, Baal were personifications of the one God, dishonored by barbarous attributes. The God of the Genesionists created hell for the majority of human beings, and delighted in the eternal tortures of those he was unwilling to save, is a conception even more barbarous than that of Moloch. Hence, the god of the Jansenists is already a veritable Satan, fallen from heaven in the sight of every wise and enlightened Christian. In the multiplication of the divine names, the Kabbalists have connected them all, either with the unity of the tetragram, the figure of the triad, or the Sephirotic scale of the decad. They arrange the scale of the divine names and numbers in a triangle, which may be presented in Roman characters as follows. Jehovah Elohim Sabaoth Ararita Fadaat Elohim Gibor Elohim Sabaoth. So in the Hebrew system, the God actually has all sorts of different phases, right? So the Shekinah is the female aspect of Jehovah, which isn't the name of anything, by the way. That's just a bad attempt at pronouncing the Tetragrammaton, which you're not supposed to try to pronounce. So when you do the middle pillar, for example, you go through this series of different god names that are related to the functions of each. They're basically chakras, right? Yeah, like Yad He Vav He, Elohim V'Da'at. Agala is one that's used in the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. Adonai, Lord, Aheye, I am that I am. And then there are a whole shit ton of re-engineering of the tetragrammaton. There are permutations like the pentagrammaton, which is crazy because each of the four elements is represented by one of the Hebrew letters in the tetragrammaton. So Shin is spiritual fire, right? And so you descend the spiritual fire into the center of the four elements and it becomes the pentagrammaton. And if you say it out loud, it's Yoshua, which is savior. So the four elements are redeemed by spirit. Pretty wild. The sum of all these divine names formed from the one tetragram is a basis of the Hebrew ritual and constitutes the occult force which the Kabbalistic rabbins invoke under the name of Shimhamphoros. Shimhamphoros, I've always heard it said. We have now to concern ourselves with the tarot from the Kabbalistic point of view and have already indicated the occult source of the name. This hieroglyphic book is composed of a Kabbalistic alphabet and of a wheel or circle of 4 decades, distinguished by 4 symbolical and typical figures, each having for its radius a scale of 4 progressive figures which represent humanity: a man, woman, youth, child, master, mistress, knight, esquire. I guess it's equivalent. Yeah, it is equivalent. I've heard that described differently, but it's equivalent. The 22 figures of the alphabet represent, in the first place, the 13 dogmas, and secondly, the 9 beliefs authorized by that Jewish religion which is so strong and so firmly established by the highest reason. Here follows the religious and Kabbalistic key of the tarot, formulated in technical verses after the mode of the ancient lawgivers. Okay, so a conscious active cause in all we see, and number proves the living unity. No bound hath he who doth the whole contain, but all proceeding fills life's vast domain. Soul worthy worship he the only Lord, doth his true doctrine to clean hearts accord. But since faith's works a single pontiff need, one law have we, and at one altar plead. Eternal God, for aye their base upholds, heaven and man's days alike his rule unfolds. In mercy rich, in retribution strong, his people's king he will appraise ere long. The tomb gives interest to the promised land, death only ends, life's vistas still expand. These doctrines sacred, pure, and steadfast shine, and thus we close our numbers scale divine. Good angels all things temper and assuage, while evil spirits burst with wrath and riggedy rage. God doth the lightning rule, the flame subdue. His words control both vesper and her dew. He makes the moon our watchman through the night, and by his sun renews the world in light. Good one. When dust to dust returns, his breath can call life from the tomb, which is the fate of all. His crown illuminates the mercy seat and glorifies the cherubs at his feet. By the help of this purely dogmatic explanation, we shall already understand the Kabbalistic alphabet of the tarot. Thus, figure 1, entitled the buffoon, represents the active principle in the economy of divine and human autotalia. Figure 2, vulgarly called Pope Joan, represents dogmatic unity based upon numbers and is the personification of the Kabbalah or the gnosis. Figure 3 represents divine spirituality and the emblem of a winged woman holding in one hand the apocalyptic eagle and the other the world suspended from the end of her scepter. The other emblems are equally clear and can be explained as easily as the first. Turning now to the four suits, namely clubs, cups, swords, circles, or pentacles, commonly called deniers. All of these are hieroglyphs of the tetragram. And while we're on the subject, this solar cycle is cycle 25, and 2 plus 5 is 7. And the tarot is card number 16, which means its essence is also 7. And a little challenge for you guys. You can use AI to do this quickly. Just look up all of the 7s in the tarot and read them and think about what's going on in the world right now. It'll bliggity blow your mind. Promise. Turning now to the four suits, namely clubs, cups, swords, and circles or pentacles, commonly called deniers. All these are hieroglyphs of the tetragram. Thus, the club is the Egyptian phallus or Hebrew yod. The cup is the stis or primitive He, the breath. The sword is the conjunction of both, kinky, or the lingam, represented in Hebrew preceding the captivity by vow, while the circle or pentacle, image of the world, is the He final of the divine name, the last breath. Now let us take a tarot and combine all its emblems one by one into the wheel or rota of William Postel. Let us group the four aces, the four twos, and so on together. We shall then have 10 packs of cards giving the hieroglyphic interpretation of the triangle of divine names on the scale of the denarii as previously tabulated. By referring each number to its corresponding sephira, we may then read them off as follows. Let me check in with the chat. It's been a minute. Make sure that if there's anyone lost that has questions, I can do my best to answer them. I deleted my comments to listen better. Thank you, sir. How was my hospital trip? Yeah, it's live. My hospital trip was okay, except that it turned out that my issues are far worse. The book of nature is written in metaphors. Yeah. Okay, so I'm caught up there. It was far worse than I don't know if you were here when I talked about this in the beginning. I assume you wouldn't be asking if you were, so I'll tell you. Basically, when they cut me open, they found out that like my intestines were like all over the place. There were holes in things, and they had like fallen through, and I mean it was bad from what I hear. And so the surgery ended up taking way longer than it was supposed to, and now my recovery time is like far longer than expected, which is not good for our finances. So we do appreciate support, you guys. It's really helpful. We're demonetized. Become a patron, and you get plenty of value for your contribution, including access to our private Discord, which will be happening on Saturday. And, you know, we don't just sit around and talk. We're trying to come up with actionable plans to empower the community. We've been batting around the idea of a crypto bot, high frequency trading arbitrage bot, and also experiments in consciousness that require groups of people that could be very fruitful. So join us. If you want to be one of the cool kids, you know. The Kabbalah, Yod-He Vav-He, 4 signs present the name of every name. Keter, the 4 aces, 4 brilliant beams adorn his crown of flame. Chakma, the 2 fours, the 4 twos, 4 rivers ever from his wisdom flow. Bina, the 4 threes, 4 proofs of his intelligence we know. What is it? Sorry guys, I'm a bit out of it from poor sleep from, pain all the time. The 4 fundamental forces of physics. I'm not even going to try to name them right now, but that's one level of it. And then the 4 elements are another expression of that. 4 benefactors from his mercy come. Chesed. Geburah, the 4 fives, 4 times 4 sins avenged his justice sum. Typeret, the 4 sixes, 4 reigns unclouded makes his beauty known. Netzach, the 4 sevens, 4 times his conquest shall in song be shown. Had, the 4 eights, 4 times he triumphs on the timeless plain. Yesod, the 4 nines, foundations for his great white throne maintain. Malkut, the 4 tens, 1 fourfold kingdom owns his endless sway. as from his crown these streams a fourfold ray. Too big now. By the simple arrangement, the Kabbalistic meaning of each card is exhibited. For example, the 5 of clubs rigorously signifies the Gebara of Yod, that is, the justice of the Creator or the wrath of man. The 7 of cups signifies the victory of mercy or the triumph of woman. The 8 of swords signifies conflict or eternal equilibrium, as in the octave. And so of the others. We can thus understand how the ancient pontiffs proceeded to make the oracle speak. The chance dealing of the layman's invariably produced a fresh Kabbalistic meaning, exactly true in its combinations, which alone were fortuitous. And seeing that the faith of the ancients attributed nothing to chance, they read the answers of providence in the oracles of the tarot, which were called Therof or Teraphim by the Hebrews. As the erudite Kabbalist Gaffarel, one of the magicians employed by Cardinal Richelieu, was the first to perceive. As the figures, final couplet will suffice to explain them. A lot of talking, man. I really need a pillow for my butt too, but I don't think my partner will hear me if I scream. There's no one there to hear me scream. King, Queen, Knight, Esquire, the married pair, the youth, the child, the race, thy path by these to unity retrace. At the end of the ritual, we shall provide further details, together with full documents concerning the marvelous tarot book, which is of all books the most primitive, the key of prophecies and dogmas, in a word, the inspiration of inspired works, a fact which has remained unperceived equally by the science of Court de Gebain and by the extraordinary intuitions of Etea or Aliete. I don't know what the hell those people are. The 10 Sephirot and the 22 tarots form what the Kabbalists term the 32 paths of absolute science. With regard to particular sciences, they distinguish them into 50 chapters, which they call the 50 gates. Among Orientals, the word gate signifies government or authority. The rabbis also divided the Kabbalah into Bereshit, which is the first word of the Bible that means in the beginning, or universal Genesis, and Merkabah, or the chariot of Ezekiel, then by means of a dual interpretation of the Kabbalistic alphabeta. They form 2 sciences called Gematria and Temera, and so composed the notary, which is fundamentally the complete sciences of the tarot signs and their complex and varied application to the divination of all secrets, whether of philosophy, nature, or the future itself. We shall recur in our 20th chapter of this work. So a couple of remarks on this. The Merkabah, very interesting subject. And if you remember the story, you have a metal tent that descends down out of the sky. And the inhabitant only wants Moses to see his face. And now remember, Moses is kind of sketchy. He might be an undercover cop sent by the pharaohs to actually take the tribe of Judea out into the desert and starve them to death, or get them lost and leave them there or something. And so this thing shows up. Well, of all the ancient people that we know of, who is the most likely to have had some weird fucked up technology? The pharaohs, right? So Moses is connected to the pharaoh, and then this thing shows up that only wants to communicate with him. A little bit sus, isn't it? And so if you piss this thing off, you come and stand behind it, and it incinerates you with the flames. It knows about diseases. It tells people to avoid the blood of people that have sores, and, it seems to know stuff that the tribe of Judea wouldn't have known, but that a fucking alien would know, right? And so metal tent flying around, it hovers above the ground, and here's the thing, it shoots exploding projectiles. The hell is that? That wasn't a concept back then. It would blow up, enemy tribe battalions or whatever. It had a political agenda, it seems. Pharaoh. So I find that all pretty interesting, but not related to Merkabah, actually. The Merkabah chariot of light concept supposedly also exists in the Zulu language and has the same meaning. And the idea basically is that if you were going to travel from star system to star system, doing so in a light hologram form would be much more. That's the way you would do it, right? Because at the speed of light, there's no time. So from your point of view, it would be no different from teleporting. The problem with this theory is that we have just teleported information in a laboratory recently. And that's not too much of a stretch from teleporting a human being. The thing is, it's done with entanglement. So it's instantaneous. It would not kill you as long as everything was moved properly. You know what I mean? There would be no disruption of biological processes or anything. There's no reason why it can't happen. So it seems more likely to me that, if we've had computer technology for less than 100 years, and the estimated number, according to the Dirac equations, for civilizations that have had technology for 10,000 years, I think the low estimate is 300 million and the high is like 150 trillion, or it could be 150 million and 300 trillion. It doesn't really matter. It's a huge number. So teleporting would be way faster. But who knows? Maybe you have to have a docking station in both places if you're going to teleport around. So there could be some need for this. But that's what always came to mind when I heard of the Merkaba, that would be the way that you would travel around. There's also in the mystery tradition a concept of formulating the body of light. And this can be used for astral travel, but it's also used to just go places and do stuff. And it is something that you practice by basically meditating, generally pranayama style, and formulating and visualizing this body of light, getting up, separating itself from your body, and then going about to try to attempt something. And you would set up a circumstance where your body of light can go and verify something that you couldn't have known, or it can go and observe something, and then you can verify it after the fact. But that's one of the training modules, developing the body of light. So let me check in with the chat. I don't think I'm going to read much more tonight because, is this a new chapter or not? That is, okay. Timera and So Composed Notary Art. So Timera is like gematria, where you organize, reorganize. Let me change the screen now and we'll have a little chat. I'm actually going to get up and get a pillow too for my buttocks because it hurts to sit on this chair. And I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about gematria and answer any questions that you guys might have about any subjects whatsoever for a little bit. And then I'm going to continue rehearsing for the upcoming music stream. The music clips that I have promoted have done surprisingly well, so I'm putting more energy into that, trying to up my production levels and make sure I just never look like a clown ever again on the internet due to glitching software or whatever. Why is my... Oh, it's just that little. Sorry, guys, I'm almost there. Bigger. What the hell? There you go. Okay, that's better. I'll be right back. But yeah, what I was saying is the next music stream should be I have to be really careful not to cough because it'll really hurt me. Man, not good, you guys. Yeah, it's not fantastic. Ready to be able to like work out and run and stuff again, man. This has really gone on long enough. I feel more than long enough. But Saturday, I'm hoping. Thing is, I still can't sing. I don't have the muscles for that. So if you guys have any questions or comments, I will check in with the chat momentarily. And I just wanted to say something about gematria and temera. Temera is basically just reorganizing the letter order, which the reason for this in Hebrew, it makes more sense than it would in English, because in Hebrew gematria, the position of the letter can change the numerical value, right? So if it's at the end of the word, it's a final, and then it has a different value. So anyways, gematria is an interesting thing because a lot of people kind of scoff at the idea, and it makes sense to scoff at it in a sense, because it's like, okay, well, you know, you have letters and then you assign numbers to them which are arbitrary or capricious, and then you add them together and there happen to coincidentally be relationships in the numbers. It just doesn't. Okay. How about this though? Like the second time I smoked DMT, I smoked a whole lot, and my symptoms for chronic fatigue syndrome or from chronic fatigue syndrome went away. And so I jumped up right away and went to the gematria calculator online and punched in N-dimethyltryptamine, and the only phrase in the database that had the same numerical value was cure for chronic fatigue syndrome. And so, you know, when you have something with that degree of specificity and also utility, you know, it has application, it means something, it does something, and there's a use. It's harder to dismiss, right? And then if you think about this, you have language, which has logic. Have you ever heard of logic existing without arithmetic? There's no logic without mathematics. So there is an underlying mathematical structure in all language, or it wouldn't work. So the idea is that we really just drape sounds over these numbers. And so that's why gematria actually functions. You know, and it's another great example of these things where, you know, the common man, pearls before swine kind of thing, the profane, they're laughing in your face, but they're actually the ones that are not on the level, you know. The one caveat I'll give them is that in most cases, people that believe in this kind of stuff don't really know why they believe in it, or, you know, can't explain how it works or anything. And I think that needs to be remedied, you know. The redemption of the sacred sciences is like number one importance right now in terms of establishing a sensible new paradigm for humanity. Here, I got to go back to the chat. I can't see can't see it well enough there. Okay, thoughts on abandonment in the wilderness and prolonged isolation in the wilderness as spiritual or shamanic practice. You know, these really extreme approaches like that, you know, I'm not going to say it can't be efficacious. Obviously it can. Any kind of dramatic, extreme trial and tribulation is going to have some kind of effect, you know. But I think that a lot of these approaches that have developed come from actually a lack of understanding. They come from superstition. They come from a innate sense of shame and guilt that we have to suffer in order to redeem ourselves, in order to be worthy of the reception of divine knowledge. And it is true that I've never met anyone that hasn't suffered a lot that has that kind of knowledge. And certainly, prolonged fasting. I've experienced this myself. The early part of my initiation, I had no food or water or sleep for 4 days, and that put me walking between worlds for sure. I don't really know what to say about that. Obviously, it can work, but I don't know that those kind of extremes are really the point. It depends on the individual and their starting place. Where it begins, where it ends usually depends on where it begins. Another interesting aspect of this suffering as means to enlightenment, I recently discovered that people that have narcissistic abuse as children develop extremely good pattern recognition, and there are entire communities of people on TikTok that are, very similar to me to a degree that really shocked me. They make all kinds of super accurate predictions, and it's not just normal pattern recognition. It goes to the point of being kind of prophetical pretty routinely, I guess. And there are other aspects of that where the suffering and abuse and trauma actually causes some sort of adaptation in our brains that gives us superpowers. So yeah, that's one way to go about it for sure. For me, though, the necessary thing is really mindfulness and the ability to self-psychoanalyze, which requires some level of detachment and objectivity. It requires some basic understanding of psychology. Generally, if you don't just naturally have an intuitive understanding of psychology, then this kind of mysticism is probably not your bag anyways. That's been my experience, that people either kind of intuitively grasp this once they get their mind into it at all, or it's just not going to happen. And I think a lot of people are noticing this more and more and more, that, they talk about trying to wake up muggles and you get nothing. You're not going to. It's not their fate. It's not their destiny. It's not their true will. And not everyone is meant to. There is a massive structure that the entire thing is working synergistically towards a certain end. And like, for example, if everyone on Earth woke up 10 years ago, the system would just collapse, So this sort of staged, gradual evolutionary process is the only way to do it. Otherwise, the momentum of the pieces falling would be too violent, and the structure would become disaggregated, if that's even a word. So let's see, where's our chat? Do we have any other questions or subjects that you guys would like to throw out there before I bounce? Liking that average view duration, though, man. People really stuck around this time. That's great. That's griggity great. All right. Not seeing anything yet. So then, obviously responsible and 11 concurrent viewers and 11 likes. Responsible use of psychedelics is absolutely key, I think it's probably just as efficacious as torturing yourself. I think these really extreme methodologies that we were talking about earlier are for people that have really bad issues, maybe extreme self-control issues, discipline issues, willpower issues, and they need that kind of forging in a crucible, forging by fire. For most of us, I think, you just have to educate yourself in the basic sciences. You need to understand what's going on around you. You need to take psychedelics in the right way for the right reasons under the right circumstances, And then beyond that, every little bit of really what is appropriate for any individual's practice is going to be determined by their proclivities and predispositions, There's no one size fits all approach to this sort of consciousness development. All right, guys. Well, you mentioned the tetrad, tetractus, and the importance of preliminary understanding in reading Levi. Yes, I did. Is that a question or what is that? Yeah, just go back to the first, I think it's the first or second episode or whatever you want to call this. First installment, second installment of this. I had AI break it down. I explained it and Levi explained it. So we go real deep into it. It's the first, second, maybe the third one. Wait a minute. Is it the fourth? Because the tetrad would be the fourth chapter. I don't know. You should watch them all anyways. So, all right. Anyways, guys, I'm, fresh out of surgery, so I don't have much strength left for this. And it's starting to hurt again. So thank you so much for spending this time with me. You'll find a playlist with all of these shits in it. Oh, you're wondering if I would elaborate? Well, yeah, I did elaborate a ton. That's what I'm saying in the other one. I'll give you an example, though. The tetrad being realized by, or the triad being realized by the tetrad. When you have and actually music works for the entire unfolding of this, from the duad to the triad to the tetrad. But you have three tones, and it's not until you have the third that you can tell whether it's a minor or major chord, right? And then the fourth sort of gives a greater context and a completion. It is the stable end goal of creating a chord, a four-note chord, right? And if you look at the way that these tones function, you'll see that they correlate with the four fundamental forces of physics, where gravity is not really a fundamental force. It's more of a consequence of the other forces, right? And the same is true of the elements. There are three elements, actually. The fourth is a derivative of the others, so it's not really a true element. And yet, there would be no formalization of those elements without this fourth thing. So that's kind of the gist of it, but like I said, go back and watch that other section, because we really went like way down the rabbit hole with that one, and it's really essential to understand. So thank you guys all for being here. I gotta go, but I appreciate each and every one of you. Please consider becoming a patron, supporting the channel, or making a contribution. I'm going to be out of commission for a while, so that's not helpful for us. And I will see you guys again probably tomorrow night. Oh, I have a video coming, but first, my patrons, we're going to watch it together. It's animal encounters from the jungle when I actually touched them for the most part. Or was attacked by them, or whatever was going on. Not really any attacks, I don't think. I mean, maybe close calls, but yeah. So I didn't include what the species are or the indigenous folklore, any of those things in the public version. So I'm going to do a stream, preview the video, and then I'm going to give the stories and the information about the animals, and also the stories about the encounters, how it happened, if it's interesting, and also the indigenous folklore regarding some of these creatures. And also there will be additional animals featured. So thank you guys so much for being here, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Like, subscribe, bell notifications, all on.